Positioning. It's something you're always doing, but never thinking about. Most of the times you make a cool play, it's because you are in a great spot relative to the enemy team. But what does that mean exactly? We're going to break positioning down into several parts, each of which is important, but the balance of which is most important depends on your weapon and playstyle. Chokepoints are narrow spots on the map that players need to pass through in order to reach the objective or other important areas. Examples of this include the Splat Zone on Hagglefish Market, the ramp or block to push on Museum d'Alfonsino, and the ramp on Inkblot Art Academy. These are usually the only way through, so anyone looking to push has to pass through them. When you're on defense, these areas are key points for stopping the Rainmaker, tower, or aggressive enemies. Sharking near choke points or bombarding them with bombs and fire are good ways to help your team out. When your team is pushing, choke points are what determines how long your push can go on for. If your team has the objective, try setting up in a choke point between the enemy spawn and the objective, so that the enemy has to go through you in order to stop it. Big Bubbler, Crab, Splash Wall, Ink Mine, and other stalling tools are perfect in these situations. One of the biggest mistakes on modes like Rainmaker and Tower is not pushing up aggressively ahead of them, when doing so would give the objective a free pass behind you. If you set up too far back or outside a choke point, the enemy could just ignore you and go around. That's why it's important to make them focus on you. Most weapons in this game prefer high ground. Why is that? Because of gravity. This helps them in a few ways. It's much harder to push an enemy when you have to climb a wall to get to them. That gives you that extra time you need to either run or prepare for a fight. It increases your effective range. You're able to shoot farther horizontally because you start with that extra bit of height. This gives you extra range relative to people on the ground, whose range is slightly decreased because they have to shoot upwards. It also helps with paint, as you're able to paint the feet of anyone trying to push you without worrying about being contested or rushed down. High ground is super important for long-range backline weapons, including Charger and Explosher, as well as weapons that paint a lot or want to put extra distance on the bombs they throw. There are a few weapons that don't like high ground, including Bloblobber because of its mid-range awkward spot, and Splatana because that weapon has no gravity and a slow projectile. You want to position in spots that don't have too many angles to be attacked from. If you see enemies like Chargers sitting in particular spots of the map, be sure you're not clearly in their view. Try playing close to walls and under enemies. It's a safer place than the middle of the open. If you're a weapon that can hit outside of line of sight, like a Slosher or Blaster, always try to position so that you can hit them, but they have no options to hit you. Bombs can also accomplish the same thing and cover you as you hold your position. Good positions are ones with more options that help your team. If you're in a spot that's off towards the side of the map and away from the objective, even if you get kills, there's nothing that you can do to affect the objective if the enemies decide to ignore you. You want to put yourself in a position where if the situation of the game changes, you're not too far removed to be useful. Sometimes the same spot can serve multiple purposes. Maybe you're positioned in the middle of the map so you can support your team's push with Crab Tank. After the push fails, you could stay in that same spot and play defense. Compared to, say, flanking with this strategy, you give your team a lot of reliability, and they can rest knowing that you're keeping an eye on the objective. When you position aggressively or flank, it's important to have an idea of escape routes. Often, there are ways to back up to a safe position faster than you got there, because you climbed onto high ground when pushing. These include the ramp on Sturgeon, the plat on Mincemeat, and many more. Not every route has a way besides where you came from, so keep these spots in mind to mix things up. Positioning is as much about painting as it is about killing and playing objective. In your downtime, you should be painting as much as you can, especially near choke points and objective. Positioning near and painting relevant spots that the enemy will have to pass through will win you games on its own. If you're the aggressor in a situation, it's also important to consider whether you have someone who paints to help you. For example, I might try to push through enemy territory or flank if I have a painting weapon or a teammate who can paint with me, but not on my own. The same also goes for Crossfire. Weapons like Splatlings, Dually Squelchers, and Splatanas can provide fire which may discourage enemies from dropping in open areas. This also helps make those areas safer for you, so if you have a teammate like this with you, you may be able to play in a more open area. There are quite a few places on maps that I'd call dead zones, or no man's land if you prefer. These are spots where almost no weapon will be able to sustain itself for very long. These areas are typically right in the middle of the action, in open, exposed areas with high ground nearby where you can be attacked from. Places like this include the middle of most Splat zones, the courts on Sturgeon Shipyard, near the clam basket area on Undertow, and many more positions where you run out of options quickly. You want to minimize your time in these areas as much as possible, but you still need to get through them frequently. Ideally, you should use your sub or special weapon to buy time for you to cross these spaces. By doing that, you can get somewhere less exposed and closer to your target at the same time. Splash walls or long range can make some of these spots useful for a bit, but you do run out of time eventually. You want to keep in mind where the enemy team is when you choose to fight or not. If you push while multiple enemies are watching, they'll get double teamed and won't stand a chance. You'll want to wait for a break in their defense to fully commit. You could pop a special or your charger could get a kill, something that makes their defense on some part of the map weaker. Once that happens, pushing into an area where they lack manpower and defense will let you surprise them and take space. Essentially, push important areas that are being watched by the fewest people. When you're fighting, try to play at either the maximum range of your weapon or point blank. If you're somewhere in the middle, it's hard to aim, hard to avoid shots, and also getting yourself closer than you have to be, which might let shorter range weapons reach you. When enemies push up into your base, they push quickly. Get yourself into a position where you won't be swarmed and have your feet painted, like a high ground position or one with awkward terrain. Backing up to teammates also helps slow their approach. Be patient and wait until you have support from them, and then take back control. You usually want to position and play to your weapon's strengths, but sometimes you can't afford to do that. If a teammate goes down at an inopportune time, or a flank comes up, or specials start being used, you might have to change the role you're playing. You should try to play to fill in the gaps of what your team is missing. Is your team all grouped up on the left? Try heading right. Is an important choke point not being watched? Do it yourself. Is your team pushed ahead of objective? You should grab it and use that opportunity to move up with them. Essentially, don't clump up with teammates, and if you notice your team has a weakness, go cover it yourself. Playing too close to teammates means that if they suddenly go down, you'll get trapped in their ink and go down with them. Play close enough that you can get there if you have to, but far enough away that you can watch the important spots on the map like we've discussed. Different weapons care a different amount about each of these tips. Chargers love the high ground and locking down choke points, but won't be focusing on paint or flanking most of the time. Blasters care a lot about paint and getting stuck in dead zones, but don't have any advantage from high ground. Use your gut to put these tips into practice with your weapon, and you'll find games easier without even trying that much harder. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like or subscribing. I'm Fusion, thank you for watching.